Tom Hanks had always been a man of rational thought, never one to believe in the supernatural. But one evening, during a film shoot in a small remote town, he found himself checking into an old, historic hotel with a dark past. The building was ancient, its walls adorned with faded paintings and its hallways dimly lit, casting long shadows. Despite the whispers he'd heard from the crew about the hotel's haunted reputation, Tom remained skeptical. To him, it was just another night in a quaint vintage place. Nothing more. Little did he know, that was all about to change. Before we dive into the eerie encounters that Tom faced, take a moment to hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling stories. You won't want to miss what happens next. As Tom walked into his room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something felt off. But he brushed it aside. After all, it was just another night in another hotel. Or so he thought. That night, as Tom settled into bed after a long day of filming, something strange happened. The room, which had been warm and cozy just moments before, suddenly became icy cold. Tom glanced at the thermostat, but it was set to a comfortable temperature. He pulled the blankets tighter around him, thinking maybe it was just a draft. But then, it hit him, a feeling of being watched. He couldn't explain it, but the sensation was undeniable. The air in the room felt heavy, as though something or someone was there with him. Tom sat up, his heart beginning to race, scanning the room for any signs of movement. There was nothing. But the coldness persisted, and so did the eerie sensation. His mind raced between rational thoughts and the stories he had heard earlier about the haunted hotel. "It's just in my head," he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the fear. Eventually, he managed to fall asleep, but the strange feeling lingered. Little did Tom know, this was only the beginning of the terror that awaited him in this haunted hotel. The following night, Tom tried to brush off the unsettling feeling from the night before. After all, it was probably just exhaustion, right? But as soon as the lights went out, things took a darker turn. In the middle of the night, he was jolted awake by a series of strange sounds. At first, they were faint, just a few creaks and groans, like the old building settling. But soon, they grew louder. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, echoing through the hallway outside his door. Tom listened intently, his pulse quickening. But when he peeked through the door's peephole, there was no one there. As he lay back down, the noises continued. This time, it wasn't just footsteps. There were whispers, soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to be coming from inside the walls. His heart pounded as the whispers grew louder, almost as if they were trying to say something. Tom turned on the lamp beside his bed, hoping the light would chase away the fear. But the noises persisted, lingering in the shadows of the room. The noises eventually stopped, but Tom was wide awake, feeling more disturbed than ever. Something was definitely wrong with this place, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to confront it yet. By the third night, Tom was on edge. He had tried to rationalize the cold presence and strange noises, but deep down, he knew something was terribly wrong. That night, he decided to keep the lights on, hoping it would bring him some peace. It didn't. Around 3 a.m., just as Tom was about to drift off, he felt it again. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. This time, though, it was stronger, more menacing. Slowly, he opened his eyes and froze. At the foot of his bed stood a shadowy figure. It was tall, with indistinct features, but Tom could make out the faint outline of a person motionless, just staring at him. His heart leapt into his throat. For a moment he was paralyzed, unable to move or speak. He blinked, hoping the figure would vanish. But it remained, looming at the end of the bed. Tom fumbled for the lamp switch, his hands trembling. When he finally turned on the light, the figure was gone. The room was empty again. He sat up, gasping for breath, his mind racing. Had he really seen that? Or was it just his imagination playing tricks on him? But it felt so real, so vivid. The weight of the fear still clung to him, and sleep was now impossible. Tom didn't know what to do next, but one thing was clear. He was no longer alone in that room. The ghost, or whatever it was, had made its presence known, and this was only the beginning of a night he would never forget. The next morning, Tom couldn't shake the lingering fear. He tried to go through his day as if nothing had happened, but the events from the night before kept replaying in his mind. Finally, after another restless night, he decided he couldn't ignore it any longer. It was time to speak up. He made his way downstairs to the front desk, where a young woman greeted him with a smile. Tom hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to bring it up, but the words spilled out. "I need to ask you something. Strange. Have any unusual things happened in this hotel? Any ghost stories or, I don't know, paranormal activity?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his voice shook slightly. The woman's expression shifted immediately, her smile fading. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first to ask, Mr. Hanks. This hotel has a long history. Many guests have reported strange occurrences, things they can't explain." She went on to tell him about a previous guest who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, last seen near the same room Tom was staying in. The staff never found any trace of the guest, and rumors about the hotel's haunted past only grew stronger after that. Tom felt a chill creep down his spine. It wasn't just his imagination after all. This place really was haunted. After his conversation with the staff, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something far darker was at play. But he tried to stay calm, thinking maybe it was all just coincidence or his overactive imagination. That night, however, things would take a terrifying turn. As he entered his room, everything seemed normal at first. He dropped his bags and sat down on the bed. But something felt different, like an unseen presence was in the room with him. Tom tried to shrug it off. But then, it happened. His suitcase, which had been resting by the corner of the room, suddenly slid across the floor by itself, coming to a stop in the middle of the room. He blinked, unable to believe what he was seeing. He quickly stood up and checked the room, but there was no explanation. No drafts, no reason why the suitcase should have moved. As the night went on, more unexplainable events occurred. The lights flickered on and off, and his belongings, a book, a glass of water, moved slightly when he wasn't looking. At one point, he could have sworn he saw something shift in the corner of the room, a dark shadow, lingering just out of his line of sight. Tom's heart raced. This was no longer just strange occurrences. It was getting worse, and it was clear. Whatever haunted this hotel had no intention of letting him leave peacefully. Tom knew he had to do something, but he was too scared to confront whatever was tormenting him. The terror was escalating, and he was powerless to stop it. By the fifth night, Tom had reached his breaking point. The hauntings were relentless. Each night brought more terror, more unexplainable phenomena. His sleep was a restless nightmare, and every corner of the room felt like it was watching him. He couldn't take it any longer. In a desperate attempt to end it, Tom made a decision. He would confront whatever was haunting him. He refused to let fear control him any longer. He stayed awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, his heart racing, waiting for the inevitable. Around 2 a.m., the room grew unnaturally cold again, the air thick with a sinister presence. Tom's breath came out in visible puffs as a shadowy figure began to materialize at the foot of the bed. It was the same figure he had seen on his first night. This time, it didn't vanish. It slowly started to move towards him, its outline becoming clearer. Tom stood up, his voice trembling but determined. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, his words echoing in the silent room. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the figure halted, its eyes locking with Tom's, and just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving the room in total stillness. Tom was left standing there, heart pounding, the fear still gripping him. He had faced the ghost head-on, but was this the end of the terror? Or had it only just begun? The next morning, Tom didn't hesitate. He packed his bags as quickly as possible, his hands trembling as he stuffed his belongings into the suitcase. The hotel staff noticed his hurried departure, but he didn't say a word. He simply handed over the room key, gave them a tight-lipped smile, and walked out. The moment he stepped into the fresh air outside, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. But as he drove away, the fear still clung to him. The events of the past few nights haunted his thoughts, and he couldn't shake the images of the shadowy figure. He knew deep down that he would never return to that hotel again. In interviews later, Tom casually joked about the haunted hotel, downplaying the experience with a laugh. But when asked if he'd ever stay in another haunted place, he gave a serious answer, his eyes shadowed with the memory. "I don't care what kind of role I'm playing. There's no way I'm going near a place like that again." As Tom drove off into the distance, one thing was clear. The terror he faced in that haunted hotel would stay with him forever. A chilling reminder that some things are better left unexplored.